Okay, welcome everyone to the March 2024 Microsoft 365 Modern Management Meetup. So we've actually got some big news today. Ben is here after a long absence. So we were sort of having discussions about, do we take his name off the wall? But we thought, no, we'd leave it up here just to apply some pressure to make sure he turns up occasionally.
Yeah,
and and
Jeroen's
has got a 7:30 a.m. meeting, and I think it's 7:36 a.m. for him right now. So we may see him drop in a little bit later, but no guarantee on that one. So just a quick introduction on my side. My name's Mark O'Shea, and we've got plenty to talk about today. So I'll just let Steve, Ben, and actually Aresh, if you want to do a bit of an intro here as well. If you want us to sort of throw you on here, let me know, because it will probably help you in certain ways to be here.
Absolutely. That's a I'm the resident guy who joins in very frequently and often speak as well. So, and we are speaking, don't want to steal the thunder later in the week as well. So,
yep.
Nice. I'll do a little intro. Hey, my name's Ben. I think everyone on here knows me, or I've met them at least once. I work at Patch My PC. I do automation stuff. Very exciting. And I am going to apologize in advance that I may need to duck out a little bit early, but I am here and I am excited.
Are you really?
Yes, I said it out loud.
And obviously, I'm Steve Hosking. I work for Microsoft on the Windows Cat team and do a whole heap of crazy stuff in that space.
Oh yeah, that reminds me, Steve. I haven't put your intro piece into my deck for Friday yet.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll just I think because we've got I'm pretty sure everyone who's on has joined previously, so maybe we don't need to worry about introductions this week. But if you have been absent for a while, just drop a comment into chat. But I guess really it's two main things that I just wanted to sort of cover, or that I thought would be good to cover off this week. And I guess both of the things that we'll be sort of talking about here, such as the just like an overview of some of the stuff we'll be doing at Workplace Ninjas on Friday in Sydney, because I guess some of the things we're covering there are potentially things we probably should do a variant of those in a future version of these sessions. Now, I think I will have a very good reason to potentially do a version of mine next month. But we just have to wait and see. Let's see how subtle/unsubtle I can be on Friday without getting in trouble. And then the second part of it is just around. We won't go too deep into this. It's just more of a matter of we want to just sort of get a feel for where people are at, and if there are any particular like Azure services that can be leveraged with Intune and Win365, etc., that are things that you probably need to know something about, but you just haven't, for whatever reason, you just haven't had the opportunity, or you just like there's a little bit too much inertia for you to actually take a look at some of that stuff, and you need a bit of a nudge in the right direction. So we'll sort of just, after we sort of go through that first part, now I think realistically we'll probably spend most of the time talking about Workplace Ninjas, because I'm sure, or at least I hope, that the three of us are in pretty good shape for Friday's sessions. I'm looking to see if anyone's hanging their head in shame. No, everyone's good. Okay, so, and then the final piece, just general discussion. That's where we'll stop the recording just in case anyone's got anything that they want to ask, but they don't want there being any kind of audio or visual recordings of that. So again, I think we saw that there were, like everyone, actually, Harm, we do have a first timer, so Harm, welcome. So you're over in the Netherlands as well. So
yes, just like Matthijs, who's already joined too. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Good morning,
I didn't see Matthijs pop in here. Oh, okay, as well. So welcome. And was it, so how did you find out about the group? I've got a bit of an idea, but I'll let you tell us.
It's probably Jeroen's fault, and I saw it on the Meetup app. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think Matthias is trying to talk, but he's on mute.
Am I? Is
You
it
are
better
now.
now?
You're okay
Yes,
now. Yep.
you're all good now.
Okay, good. Same as Harm. I saw the invitation on Meetup, so
Awesome.
I decided to join in.
Nice. Welcome.
Yeah. So
Thank
so we've got that lovely time that it is here where if we do something around this time, it's while you can basically it's your first or maybe your first or second coffee in the morning time. So it actually works out pretty well time wise for quite a bit of Europe there. So thank you very much for joining. So just the first thing that we'll jump into is just in case there is anyone who is in Sydney that wasn't aware of it and can still organise to make their way along, is there'll be the second Workplace Ninjas event being, or the second Sydney event being held this Friday. And what I thought might be a bit of a good idea here, because I know not all of you can make it along, and also it probably is a good idea for us just to be able to bounce a few things off you, just to get some feedback in terms of, based on certain session titles, etc. What are things that you would expect to be covered versus maybe what we are thinking we're going to cover? So, and I guess for a lot of these kinds of things, like it's not necessarily that it's one-off content that we'll never deliver again, but generally it's something where we're probably doing some degree of targeting for that audience as well. So anything that any ideas that you've got, things that you think should be covered in it, I'm sure we're pretty open to some of that. So let's just jump on in. So important things to remember with this upcoming one on Friday is that it is an all-day event. So 9 to 5 o'clock, actually 9 to 5,
6.
and then networking and refreshments. I'm looking at the slide preview for the next slide, trying to read the 0.01 sized font on screen. So if we just jump in and take a look at the session. So it's good that we've got Aresh here as well today, because Aresh is opening up with the Windows 365 session. I'll have the connected cache session. Actually, I thought it was just after lunch, but no, it's good. Mikhail, who's not here, he gets the wonderful post-lunch session. I get a post-coffee break session. So, and so do you, Steve. So we're actually in pretty good shape there.
Exactly.
And I think taking a look at the topics here, I think Jose's done pretty well here in terms of not allowing, or not that he actually gave us, said, I don't think he said no to anything we said, but what I like here is that there's not really all that much overlap between the different sessions. So I know sometimes it can be frustrating when you go to even like a half-day event and the second person doesn't watch what the first person does, and they get up and start with the same 5 introductory slides, and you tune out and wish you had stayed outside and had another coffee. So this looks like there's a good amount of variety in here. So that's actually so that's a pretty good thing, considering that it is a pretty full day. Now, what I just thought I'd do before, so Aresh, you haven't seen the following slide yet. Steve's had a bit of a sneak peek at it, but don't worry, you don't need to panic. And what I just wanted to start off with, what I just sort of wanted to start off with here was just sort of a bit of general discussion around some of the thinking and the planning that goes into, let's say you have to speak at a conference, and what are some of the things you have to take into account based on, obviously the length of the session, who the audience is, or do we actually have, how strong an idea of the, how strong a sense of the audience do we actually have? And probably one of the other things that is taking a bit of getting used to is, the difference is now going back to doing in-person events again. And yeah, once we get into it, I'll sort of share what my biggest issue with some of that stuff is. And surprisingly, it's not actually the people, it's it's what
It's the technology. Mark struggles with the technology.
Yeah, it's like what's this HDMI cable? What does it plug into? Nonsense.
I only have VGA adapters.
Oh, excellent.
But it was just VGAs for everything.
Yeah. So I think so. Actually, so that's one good thing that I've noticed as I've started traveling again finally after COVID. It seems like a lot of the places that still had things like, VGA projectors, etc. All of that stuff seems to have been phased out, thankfully. Like it should have been phased out a long time ago in some cases. So I guess just here, if one of you want, either Steve or Aresh, if you just sort of want to take the lead and just sort of explain some of these things, just sort of answer. You don't have to go through everything on here, but just like any of the things that you think are important in terms of your preparation going into the session.
Yeah, I can probably go here and see. Okay, I would say I'll be probably doing live demos because I think people like to see live stuff than recorded demos. A lot of people feel recorded demos are usually scripted. So we don't want to go in that territory. So it's going to be live. Why did I choose that topic? Obviously, the choice of topic comes from your background and expertise as well. So I've been speaking on AVD, Win365, and working on those technologies for some time. So obviously, pick something which is your strong suite of product that you work on. That way you can add in value to everyone else in the audience and field all the questions and anything that gets thrown at you from an session standpoint. And did I have to do anything different for in person? Not really. Nothing different. Only thing is from being virtual and looking into the camera, at least when it's in live and in person, you can look at people live, and that's a much better experience rather than just sitting on the computer on the other side and trying to look into the webcam and trying to connect with the audience. So I think the in-person one is always much better. That's all.
Okay,
Cool.
Steve.
That's a fun one to follow up on. So obviously, why did I select the session? Well, that's easy. We need to do a Mac session, so I went, I'll put my hand up and I'll talk Mac because I like my Mac. It's brilliant. It works really well and does everything I need. From organizing and being involved in preparing for in-person events, typically I'll go and spend at least a couple of hours building out my demos. I do my demos live because everybody loves the Chaos Monkey, don't they, Ben?
Yes.
Having co-presented with me many times, Ben understands the I like to live on the edge and just get stuff done and make it magically work while getting the content across. So it's a lot of fun. From a prep point of view, it's typically the same whether I'm doing it here in my office or if I'm doing it in person, because the content's the same, the demonstration's the same. The only thing I'll typically do while I'm practicing is break out like the clicker and practice with that, make sure I'm comfortable with it. Yeah. And the questions, does anybody have questions? Because I'm happy to talk about Mac OS any day of the week.
Okay, so for me, why did I select the topic? Because I thought by the year 2024 that we wouldn't be as concerned about things like bandwidth and caching as we still are in a lot of situations. So things that you sort of think you've progressed from and you've evolved. Oh no, you keep getting dragged back into a lot of the same things over and over. Now, in terms of preparing for in-person events, probably just the big difference here for me is that just sort of making sure that I'm properly testing that things work if I want to access them remotely, because most of the time I don't sort of have everything like firewall ports, etc., opened up for, or VPN set up for inbound access until I actually need them. That means that whenever it's time for that, I've got to scramble and figure out, what did I forget to do? Why isn't it working? So hopefully, the plan is as many of the demos will be in person or will be live. But yeah, I won't show videos. If it's something where there's any major issue, I've got no shortage of screenshots. I'll have a few machines with me in case I can't, for whatever reason, if remote connectivity doesn't work back to where the lab environment is. So it's just making sure that you're covering yourself just in case. Now, in terms of prep for this one, this is probably the first time in, I want to say, at least 5 years that I've actually built a deck completely from scratch, like no pulling slides from any other material, or no reappropriating slides from other sources. And the reason for that with this was that it's because it's basically, this is sort of crossing multiple boundaries. So there's client side pieces to this as well as server side. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this session was also just to sort of tie together, when you go through some of the Microsoft content, it's hard to see get the full picture of something because the server content doesn't talk about any of the client side settings or vice versa. So that's some of the stuff that I'm going to be focusing on in here. So I did a few things different for this one, especially around the actual content prep. But I've just kept like a running list of the things that I wanted to include and talk about when I remembered grabbing screenshots of things. If I was in a situation where I thought there'd be something that I could turn into content for this. And I think I sent Steve a photo of my hotel room the other night where I was asked to bring some devices back to Australia. So I thought, what can I do with these that might be useful? Because it's late at night and I've got jet lag and I might as well get something done because I don't want to watch infomercials. So so basically I've probably got 2 to 3 times more content than I actually need. So tomorrow is really just going to be culling back down to what we need. So then with that, I guess then Aresh, do you just want to quickly, you don't worry about bringing the slides up or anything, but I guess, just sort of I'll just go back to the previous slide just so that people can see what the topics are that we're covering. Just so that you, Steve, and I can just sort of quickly go through some of the things that we're going to be covering, just to see, once again, to see what's in that. Is there anything that grabs anyone's attention in terms of something that that you want us to do as a session here in the future, or if this is something that you're interested in, whether you're attending or not, are there particular things you would expect to see in these sessions? If you just sort of want to unmute to sort of comment, or if you want to drop comments into chat, just to make sure that that we're sort of hitting the spot, because it's really easy for us to deliver the stuff that we want to deliver, and while it will hit the mark, it doesn't mean that there couldn't be some better targeting at times.
Sure, Mark. What I'm planning to cover is all the latest features and enhancements that's come out in Windows 365, essentially around Windows Boot, Windows Switch, followed by detailed demos in the Boot and Switch segment. Also talking about some few more features which are worth highlighting, like customer lockbox and other things around Windows 365 support. That's the plan, probably 30 minutes of talking and another 15 or maximum 20 minutes of demos of boot switch and some new custom policies around, customizing the lock screen around Windows boot, and all of those kind of demos is what I've planned. And followed by last 10 minutes being question and answer. So usually I would also add Azure Virtual Desktop. However, the session is purely around Windows 365 for Friday.
Okay, thanks. Excellent. So any comments from anyone around, I guess just like that brief overview, just in terms of, what, if that's the kind of thing that, if you were going to a Win365 session, is that the kind of thing that you'd expect? And I guess and actually I'll show you one of my slides when it gets to me, because one of the things that I guess where we sort of build it out, and we're sort of, generally we're trying to stick to the topic that we've got as our description. But sometimes people can turn up with sessions with very different expectations, but it's based on the thing that they want to know about, which may not actually be the topic whatsoever. So I'll share. Actually, can I jump in here, Steve?
Go right ahead,
because you'll appreciate some of this. Okay, so I'll just jump into the agenda first, just so you can see what it is. So it's around delivery optimization, so client-side settings, connected cache deployment, and things along those lines. The agenda is pretty straightforward, so just a quick overview. Basically demystifying what will actually benefit from caching. Because an important thing here, and this is something that I learned the hard way, is just because it supports delivery optimization doesn't mean it supports peer-to-peer caching, and doesn't mean it supports connected cache. And so that's obviously the kind of thing we spend a bit of time on. So the different ways we can deploy it, peer delivery, HTTP only, connected cache. I'll go through a few testing scenarios, way that you can start doing load testing, stress testing, etc. Some of the common troubleshooting pieces. And for recommendations, I'm actually thinking I might actually just leave that slide blank, because I can't really make recommendations if I don't know what people's environments are. So so that ties back into the before we begin slide. Now, so the first two pieces in here are really to address how many of you have been to a presentation or have been presenting when you've heard somebody in the audience say and make a bit of noise about it, well, that's just not going to work in our environment. How many of you have had that person in your presentation?
I've been that person, just for giggles.
Yeah, of course you have, Steve.
Yeah. Okay, so effectively here, what I'm doing with those first ones is saying, your mileage may vary. So not saying this is for everyone. And I think, and what I've tried to do here is, like, even with the session name, like, sometimes people put in kind of clickbaity session titles, like, reason, it's kind of like a BuzzFeed
What do you mean, Mark?
The 15
managing Mac OS, that's not clickbait at all.
No, that one's actually okay. Like, whereas if you put in the 10 things you must do when you manage Mac OS,
true.
I'd go into that session ready to fight, because it's like, must do. You have deliberately chosen one of my trigger words. I'm going to tell you for each one of those things, I'll say, I don't need to do that. And then
Sounds
at
like
the end
I'm
of it,
updating my slide deck.
Yeah. Well, I'll be finished by the time you get on, so I'll be having a coffee. Now, the other one as well is just really, so the first two is really about, making, even though I know there'll still be people who don't know how to interpret the first two comments, regardless of how well they're explained. The third one is just to sort of set expectations around, just because the session is on delivery optimization, which means, yes, Windows Update for Business, etc., are going to be discussed. It doesn't mean that broader updating, update strategies, etc., are part of the conversation at all. And this is something that, this is a pretty easy trap for people to fall into. So people sort of see that the topic is kind of related, and the presenter seems to know something about a related topic. Therefore, they'll keep interrupting with questions about things that really aren't the on-topic piece. So what I'm trying to do here, this is just something where I'm kind of trying to test it out with a potentially a bit of a less hostile audience than we may get sometimes, because I know there'll be quite a few familiar faces in the audience. There's actually one person in particular that I want to see how they respond to these comments. Steve, this was somebody who was quite vocal in your session last time.
Ah, yes.
Kwok, this is somebody that you have worked with. Kwok, don't say the name, but do you know who I'm talking about?
Yes, he does.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so then the other thing, I've used this before, but not for a few years. Basically, put in a comment like, everybody in the room gets one comment/question. Choose it wisely.
Sure.
That
The other thing that works pretty well, and this is more for organizers of things, is just set an expectation that there's going to be a set of, say 15 minutes at the end, that's when Q&A is.
Yeah.
So if you think of something great, or Mark has said something so incorrect that you need to jump up and down and talk about it, remember it at the end of the session. You can bring it up there.
Yeah.
It generally works, but you're always going to get people who want to participate, and also participation makes a session really, really fun.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
I'm more than happy to have people derail my conversation, because it just makes
because you like
way more
derailing
entertaining.
people's conversations, so it makes sense.
Okay, so I won't show any other slides, but so overall, even though the focus is or the general concept of the focus is quite narrow, it's actually, there's like a ton of different things that will be covered as part of it. So things, things that you can't really avoid when you're getting into this territory, things like your Office, your M365 app deployment XML files, things along those lines. There's a bit of networking in here for Steve, just to make Steve really happy. I've got some group policy screenshots in here, and
Good.
I might even log into a domain controller just to make Steve really happy during the session to do a live group policy object update.
Show me updating the DHCP scope to issue the DO, and then I'll be happy.
Now, that's outside of the scope of what I'm covering, because that's a network configuration, or that's kind of just grouped in. But that was actually one of the examples that I was thinking of. So I've actually got that worked into scenarios, especially like wireless, where maybe, or Wi-Fi, where you don't want peer-to-peer DO making smoke come out of your access point.
But the other one is to look at it when you investigate how you're going to do DO with certain CTNA agents.
Yeah, so I think I've actually got that screenshot in there that shows the different options. So that's definitely stuff that can be in there, because that also then ties into the white glove / pre-provisioning, et cetera, as well. So even though, as I mentioned, it is a fairly narrow focus, there's a bunch of closely related technologies that will get pulled into it, and that's the reason why things like your update rings and service channels, et cetera, just won't be part of the conversation at all. Okay, Steve, what about you?
I'll be talking about Macs. Let me bring up the deck to tell you what I'll be talking about. So obviously, the new stuff that's coming with Intune and Mac OS is going to be around onboarding and everything around that, which is awesome. So Platform SSO, once it lands, will be just fantastic, but we can demo what we've actually delivered today. Then we're going to step into device configuration and all of the new awesomeness that sits around declarative device management policies and everything, how that's going to play out. And then we talk about apps and how we get apps out to the devices and all of the new stuff that's coming with that. So there's a whole heap of cool stuff on the schedule, and I've got plenty of slides of pretty colors saying, hey, this is coming, this is here, and we're going to be having a lot of fun with it. Anybody got any questions around Mac other than Ben?
That's so many questions.
I'm not going to do any auth code for you though, Ben. I'm just putting it out there, auth code signing, no. And you're not going to be in the room, so I can't do it for you anyway.
I'll pay someone to go in and ask that question. Don't worry.
How much?
Yeah, you and I both know exactly who's going to ask that question, as well
Yeah, it's
as
gonna
the
be Mark.
competing product. No. They'll also ask the question around the competing product as well,
Nice.
because his boss is telling him to, because he wants to poke the bear, because he enjoys poking the Microsoft bear.
We can talk about that offline.
Okay, so I guess just like I didn't see anything in, or let me just sort of scroll back up to make sure I didn't miss anything. I'm trying to just ignore everything Ben has typed in and everything that Steve has typed in to respond to Ben, because that's 90% of the conversation.
It's called managing the chat, Mark. Come on.
Yeah. So okay. So I guess then, based on the Win365, the Mac OS, and the delivery optimization piece, just like any general feedback or comments around some of the things that that you would expect. What would you expect to see covered at a minimum? What are things that you think maybe at a stretch could potentially be time permitting, maybe that could be allowed? So just to get some general feedback from everyone. And then out of the 3 sessions, when would you like the Mac OS session delivered by Steve to the meetup in next month's session? Actually, no, I think is it April or May you're away, Steve? One or the other. I'm just throwing you
He's away in May.
Okay, so April.
So he could absolutely do it in April. I won't be here in April, but Steve will.
So there's something I'm hoping I can do in April, but I'm not certain.
Let's look to do the Mac OS one later in the year, just because of the some of the stuff that's coming out.
Yeah.
Nice hint, Steve.
No, we've been open around the platform SSO stuff, and it's not there yet. So yes.
It's that, the wonderful world of what's the date? What am I allowed to talk about today? Welcome to life.
I like how everybody's sitting there and saying I'm giving something away, but we've been public that we're working on platform SSO and it'll be out soon. So that's what I'd be suggesting we wait for, because it'll make for way better demos. We can talk about laps if you want.
Yeah, Matt, if you so
Anthony,
before we
you
get
should buy your Mac like right now. You only need an Air M2.
Yep. Agreed. Matt, feel free to jump off and talk.
Hello, everyone, and it's good morning for me. It's at 2 a.m. in Texas, so I'm not sure what time is there. But hello, Steve, and hello, everyone. I had a question about labs. I mean, we already have the policies, and it's ready to configure. But the issue is all of us, we disable the administrator default account by like everyone, each company, and we have to create one, and we have to use CSP to create it. So the question is there any way for Microsoft to comes with, so the labs policy can create an admin account, customized admin account, and then assign the policy as well? Because right now we can just assign the password and whatever, but we cannot create an account. We have to create it in a different way.
What I will say is watch this space. It's a common ask that we're hearing from a lot of customers wanting to be able to handle that scenario. But I'm not in a position to be able to give you a firm statement on anything beyond that it's something that is known and being investigated.
All right. Sorry for that, but just two more comments on the same topic of labs. I have kind of issues from our help desk team. They escalate to me because every time they use a labs, they have to copy, they have to type it manually. I mean, is there any way? Because once to prompt to admin, you have to type it manually. There's no way to copy paste. Is there any way to develop this one as well?
I thought that was admin configurable. The copy and paste it out. I was pretty sure it was, but
if you're using the protected login mode, I can't remember what it's called, secure desktop for login,
secure desktop,
then you cannot copy and paste passwords. But I mean, I don't know what your environment is, but if you have secure desktop for login enabled, then you're out of luck because it's secure. It's wonderful. By design.
Yep. So that's really good point there, Ben, is when you have the gray screen behind your username and password, that's putting it into secure desktop. So you can't copy and paste into that because you're actually changing context windows and how that works. Whereas what you can do is you can technically turn that off. You need to do your own risk assessment and everything associated on that, but we see a lot of organizations that do turn it off so they can do that copy and paste scenario.
So the question is, Steve and Ben, is there any kind of a security issue if we turn that one off?
If you turn secure desktop off?
We're not in a position to be able to give you that advice without having full understanding of your environment.
Hold up. Steve, I don't work for Microsoft. I can say some things. Secure desktop is in the name. It is more secure than not using secure desktop. So if you remove secure desktop, you are potentially increasing the chance that someone could, if they wanted to, get access to that password. Now, how do they get access to that password? It's generally memory dumps. We don't. Well, technically, I'm supposed to know quite a lot about security, but we don't have any actual security people in this meeting, so we don't have anyone that's going to spook you with, well, what if they get access to the motherboard and they reverse engineer the memory dump and all that sort of stuff? What I would suggest is that check to see whether you do have secure desktop enabled first, because I don't know whether you do. If you do, run a test. See if it increases or decreases your trust or happiness in your environment. It's really all I can say without knowing what your environment really is. But if you've got it enabled, the first thing I would be asking is find out why it's enabled. Don't just assume that it's there because someone said so and we have to do it. Ask.
It's the default.
Yeah.
It's a default.
That's why it's
exactly.
Wait, secure desktop is default for laps?
Yeah, well, no, for admin elevation.
Any elevation.
So as soon as you do admin elevation, by default, it goes and grows out behind the screen so you can put in the credentials.
That's not proper secure desktop, but yes, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and that one there is you can't copy and paste into that.
No, I mean that's UAC prompt. Yeah, that's a different thing. But yeah.
And the last two questions about this topic is there? I know Microsoft working on probably version 20, not 23, probably 24 and above. 24H2 or something. They said there's a way to create, Steve, there's a way to create the labs account. I'm not sure if you heard about that one. There's some tweets here and there.
Have a look at the insider build if you want to see anything that potentially is in the pipeline for 24H2, because it's all in there, and you'll be able to see how that works.
Sure. And is there any way to, because some companies, I work with some clients, they still using labs on-prem, and when they want to, they want to move forward with everything on the cloud and move to Intune, they say, can we, instead of enforce the policy, can we just migrate everything from the prem to the cloud?
Well, technically, yes. But the process, and this needs to be tested, validated, etc. But technically what you would do is you would reset, you'd basically turn off the Windows Labs, the V1 version of Labs, and then that's going into AD and using the traditional on-prem, and then enable on the same account the new Windows Labs, and it'll reset the password into that.
Gotcha.
Because you don't need to know the password to reset into the new platform. And then it'll actually be, you can technically do it as a step-by-step migration between the two of them. And there you go. It's actually public. Yay! I can talk about it. Yes, we do have the local administrator account being automatically management.
Through Windows?
Yeah, it's in the chat. I'll put it in there.
Thank you, Quark.
Thanks, Quark. Appreciate it.
Thanks, all.
I just wanted to highlight, Steve, on, are you able to hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Desktop session, it's a compliance policy. If your company is doing any sort of compliance, let's say CIS or any other standards, that those kind of policies are mandatory enabled on those kind of compliances. So if you were to secure your environment over and above the default behavior, even those compliance policies would call for disabling the copy paste of passwords and other things on the console, or even in the RDP sessions, basically.
Yep.
Agreed. So yeah, it's definitely a matter of understanding why and how it's being blocked, and then stepping into if you can make it available and accessible. But yeah, can you do it? Technically, yes. From your business organization, we're not in a position to give you a situation.
Now, I've just got a random question for everyone. How many of you run an insider build on your, at least one of your main usage devices?
Nope, not anymore.
Yep.
Ben's got a story, but we don't need to worry about it today.
I probably do. I can't remember most of them though.
Yeah. Let me just check something.
Probably about preparing for a session. Probably. It's been, yeah.
I've had many fun adventures with
yeah,
insider
you do
builds.
that to yourself.
Yes, I do. The best one I've had is when there was a minor upgrade to the file system that I was using, because I was using REFS between insider builds, and I then had to go back to an earlier build, like a stable build. And
why were you using REFS?
Because I can.
Because he wanted to introduce the possibility of more issues.
Yes.
to test his troubleshooting skills.
Because I was using Hyper-V on the laptop, and I put all of the VMs or VHDXs into REFS because technically it runs faster, because it works better with larger files. So that's why I did it, Benjamin. But yes, there was a version difference, and then when I went back to the stable build, I couldn't access that drive until I went back to the unstable build.
Then you had to export them. Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun.
It's a fun link in the chat for anyone who wants to read that.
Okay, so let's get on to the next topic. So again, this is one that we're sort of chatting about before the session, just to, I guess, get some awareness from people in terms of, like, as you are sort of working with, Intune and Windows, maybe with Config Manager, where maybe there's some additional Azure services that you need to start leveraging, but for whatever reason, you haven't really delved into Azure. Maybe it's the learning curve. Maybe, it's I just don't know where to begin kind of conversation. So we just wanted to throw up a few slides with some of the things that are probably, this is not designed to be like an all-inclusive list that covers off, everything in Azure that might be related. Instead, this is just really some general guidance and to kick off a few ideas around what, some of the things you probably should be aware of, some of the things you might be able to do to sort of take a step in the right direction. And this is something where, based on, I guess probably all of us have got at least some Azure experience. So there might be, something where you can jump in and give some of your own feedback in here. But I'll start off with this one. For somebody who says that, look, let's say someone coming from a desktop management or a Windows world. So, and says, look, I need to learn Azure. I need someone to tell me what I should look at so that I could sort of focus on something rather than just, going to Microsoft Learn and trying to learn Azure. So one of the ones that I really like for this conversation is Azure Virtual Desktop. Aresh good? Aresh is still on here, because I'm sure Aresh can probably throw quite a few more things onto this one. But what I really like about Azure Virtual Desktop, and I kind of forgot I left out one of the most obvious ones on here, is, so as long as you've got like a basic understanding of, deploying Windows images and things like that, some basic Windows management skills, getting thrown into the world of Azure Virtual Network or Azure IaaS with the PaaS services of AVD. I think like Azure Virtual Desktop for me is a pretty good candidate because it can leverage a lot of the skills that you probably already got. So, basically, leveraging some of your virtualization skills, leveraging some of your networking skills, etc. And so it really just ends up for a lot of people, it really just ends up being, what are the Azure specifics? So what do I need to translate from maybe my on-prem understanding of things over to what are the Azure services that are going to be, supporting that? So let me just edit this so I can put the most obvious one in here that I forgot. Compute's kind of important to AVD. Sometimes the most obvious things aren't the things you think of. So I guess then just from your perspective, Aresh, what would be like anything else that you would add now? Yeah, anything else that you would sort of think would be a good addition to this list, in terms of, what somebody, even at a minimal layer, is probably going to be exposed to when they're working with AVD?
I think this is a great starter list that you have kept: compute, networking, storage, monitor, and Entra ID. Absolutely spot on. Over and above that, what I would probably put is automation. So essentially, if you're talking about scale deployments, either you would deploy these kind of things through Terraform or essentially Bicep. And that's one of the key skills probably I would add.
Excellent. Yep.
that would be good. And essentially, I love the topic that you've picked because it's one of the most complex ones that you've picked. If you would have picked up probably compute, it's little easier, but
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
super complex because it literally is touching into everything. And uh, additional services, what I would probably also add is ASR and Azure Backup and Recovery. So site recovery, Azure Site Recovery. So if you were talking with two different geographies or two different regions, that's when you'll probably use that, and backup and recovery for doing all sorts of restores in case of disaster.
it keeps expanding.
Absolutely. That's the reason I said that you've picked up the most complex examples, and it keeps going on. But probably not to overwhelm anyone. Even if you knew 3 out of these 6, 7 bullets, that's a great starting point.
Yeah, because I think even with this, to me, where this also starts to make a lot of sense, even with existing Windows 365 functionality, is somebody who has just been using, Microsoft hosted network as opposed to deploying VMs into their own Azure VNets, for example. Like you can imagine some of the issues that people are going to have if they've basically been told you have to do this, but they haven't had any exposure to Azure VNets or whatever, or in some cases, something that that is getting more and more common now. People who just don't have any networking design exposure. So people who see an IP address with a /16 at the end of it and don't know what the thing is before the 16 and don't know what the 16 is either.
Yeah.
So a lot of and Ben,
16 means I get 16 points, right?
It does.
Yeah,
It means you get
yeah.
16 IP addresses.
Yeah.
What I just really want to jump in on this because essentially what Aresh said is true. But just from personal experience, I do find that when I'm working on a new thing in Azure generally, or, because I'm almost everything I do these days is cloud native. The process I generally find, and again, why I agree this is a good list, is it's literally the experience that you go through and you just go, okay, well, someone said that I want a virtual machine. I'm going to try this cloud thing. So you spin up, the virtual cloud, you make it accessible to the public internet, and you go, okay, I should probably lock this down. Then you look into networking. Then someone says, we probably need to increase storage. So you look into storage. You do all these things, and then someone says, okay, this works really well. We need 10 more.
Yeah.
And you go, well, this took me a week to do. It's going to take me another week to do everything else. So that's when you start looking at things like automation, and you look at things like Terraform or Bicep, or, it is a very natural progression to get to that point where all of a sudden the entire stack. But there is nothing stating this list is you need to know all these things before you start. The best thing to really do, and I'm assuming that no one on this call is, never been in an Azure portal before, but like the idea really is just start somewhere, and then you'll get to a point where you need to scale it out, and that's where you need to start realizing that you have to do automation.
I think spot on, Ben. And only one more thing that I'd like to add for people who are just beginning. Don't get overwhelmed by the automation part, because that can come in gradually as day 3, day 4, or even week 4, week 5. If you get a grasp on the portal with even the GUI and entering things to begin with, that's a great place to get the understanding first. And then later on, looking at various ways to optimize and deploy at scale using automation.
Yep.
Okay, so
Probably the one thing that's missing on this, though, Mark, is things like FS Logic or Nerdio to do profile management, because if you're going to be looking at Azure Virtual Desktop, it's typically because you're needing to do profile management or multi-session.
Yeah. So this is just a general question, and this is also targeting you, Aresh. is what ratio are you seeing, or what's your person? So if the customer doesn't care one way or another, would you be going down like Windows client, including multi-session, or are people still heavily just treating it as more of a lift and shift and basically just sort of deploying Windows Server and treating it like an RDS box in the cloud? What are you seeing at the moment?
The good part is that I usually answer this in my sessions always if I'm doing Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365. And the way I put it across to people is that the answer is, if you have a technical team and you have a technical team which has storage, which has other aspects, networking and all of the other aspects in your infrastructure, and you have these kind of teams, then you go down the path of Azure Virtual Desktop. However, if you just have a desktop team, then the Azure thing could be a very uphill and a time-consuming task. And that's when it would be better off if you did Windows 365 to begin with. And then slowly, as you train your staff gradually, you can probably, get them up to speed and deploy a Azure Virtual Desktop. Plus, the only thing difference between the two right now is if you need a lot of customization, then probably look at Azure Virtual Desktop. Else, I think as Windows 365 is becoming more and more mature product and less touch is required, and all the heavy lifting is done under the covers by Microsoft for you, that potentially I think is going to be a stellar product for the future. Only large enterprises where a lot of customization needs to go in, those are the ones who would still go with Azure Virtual Desktop, because I can tell you that after Windows 365 has come in, there's less and less traction for Azure Virtual Desktop. Like, all the hype around Azure Virtual Desktop is only now with all the big enterprise customers.
Yeah.
Nobody else wants to, if you're a 500 customer shop, or if you're 1,000 shop user shop, nobody wants to talk about Azure Virtual Desktop.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm finding surprising is that the cutoff number for people to go to, like, I thought the number of, like, let's say number of desktops that people would choose to go for Win365, like, I thought that number would be a much lower cutoff than people seem to be going for, like,
Yeah.
as opposed to AVD. Like, I thought, like, let's sort of just make some numbers up and say, 500 seats or above. Yeah, I assumed that would be, or even getting close to 500 seats. I just assumed that AVD would be dominating that space. But it seems like Win365 is not really being limited by any of those numbers, in terms of customer adoption. Yeah.
Totally agreed. And in fact, I know of a very big local customer who is in multi-thousands and on Windows 365. However, I just wanted to add one more twist to this. What I'm seeing is the hybrid adoption. So if you want a desktop, people are willing to give a predictable cost with Windows 365, where they know monthly fixed cost, because Azure can be up and down depending on your consumption of the month. And for apps, people are doing Azure Virtual Desktop. I wish it's like a feature request, and I hope Steve is listening, who can uplift this feedback. I wish they did something similar like Windows 365, but for apps. And even for Ben to think about, how Patch My PC, who does the apps. Imagine all of it getting under the covers with Microsoft, and all you're asking a customer or a enterprise to do is just put your app, and out here just put the package, and we do the heavy lifting, and just enter the number of users who are going to use the app, and all the heavy lifting is done by Microsoft. The day they make it this easy, even AVD would be like totally, there would be no use case to do something heavy lifting such as AVD in the future.
And I guess the annoying and or frustrating thing about that is that some of that functionality, Azure Remote Desktop was delivering was basically doing the app, at least the app publishing side of it pretty easily without you having to have without you having to have AVD level knowledge to get it working. So it's something where they've kind of proven to a degree that it can be done, but obviously, people's requirements would have evolved since then. So, like, it's something that I think, with no insight, it kind of seems like an obvious thing that has to be done. I guess it's a matter of like how big a priority is it and how many customers are requesting it, and how big an engineering job is it.
Absolutely, I think it's probably going to take the entire focus shifting from the AVD product into doing apps. I see the latest feature like the app attach. It's pretty cool, but it just works with MSIX packages, and we all know when you're just dealing with MSIX packages how that whole landscape is, right? So
I thought
that's
it
the
solved.
limitation.
I thought it solved everything.
That's what I thought. Yeah, that's one of the caveats that probably I would throw in. I think people are still using AVD for apps, that is remote apps, or in the legacy terms, terminal services or RDS-based apps. So hence the use case, what I'm seeing in the field is that for desktops, Windows 365 for the full fleet, and for apps, it is AVD.
Okay. And I guess on Friday we'll sort of get to hear other use cases from people who are in the room as well. And of course you'll be disappointed if there isn't someone who raises a scenario that's quite different to anything you've encountered before.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure some bank guys would be there with some unique legacy use cases,
Yeah, our organization's not allowed to connect to the cloud, so why can't we use any of these things?
I still need to use my Windows 95 computer.
Yeah. I did hear a variation of the complaint about certain functionality not being available to people who can't leverage cloud services in a cloud session. And it was like, well, that's the decision that's been made there. Okay, so let's jump into a few more here. It won't take too long, but I thought this would be a good one to start off with because it's, because some of the others I've just kept them fairly simple, just to sort of have some talking points. We don't need to spend too much time on them, but obviously, like virtual networking is a pretty big category. So even though it could just be your VNets and your subnets and VNet peering, etc., also we'd be potentially throwing in things like Azure Bastion or other types of network appliances. Like there's no shortage of stuff we can do in here. And it's, and a lot of this stuff, it's really easy to deploy, probably just making sure that you're tearing things down when you don't need them any longer when it comes to virtual appliances. Generally, the network appliances don't have a pause or a stop button as far as the ongoing costs are concerned. Now, just a quick one on the Azure storage side, like here. So probably just some of the things in here is like situations where maybe for, just there might be random things you need. So I've got things like, basically the file share capabilities of your Azure storage accounts. So if you need to do something where, basically you need to, for whatever reason, get access to a file server or use a file server as part of something, just being able to basically say create it, make it this big, use this storage type. It's pretty easy. Just make sure that port 445 outbound is allowed from the network that you're on, which is not going to be guaranteed in any way, shape, or form. I think even for me, I think my ISP blocks 445 outbound by default. And if I want to open it, I have to, you have to basically open up SMTP and a bunch of other things I don't really think I want opened up. Oh yeah, because I think Steve and I are on the same ISP, so you probably had to look at that. But there is something else. But
basically,
there's also
you have to commit and say, yes, I'm now going to manage my own firewall
yeah.
on my router.
Now, the other thing on the SMB share side that will get around that port 445 requirement, I haven't looked too closely at it, but you can actually, this is getting kind of messy, where there's basically, I think there's like a role in the Azure or the Windows Server Azure Edition. I think there's a special role that you can enable that basically allows you to proxy or tunnel via it to get access to SMB shares. And I think it's just over port 443 instead of 445. But I don't think, I don't know if that's something I really want to encourage. I'd really be questioning, why do you need those SMB shares available over public IP addresses? Because if you're going through and you've got ExpressRoute or VPNs, etc., you can just access it access it over private networking without worrying about port 445 on your externally facing firewalls. Now, for logic apps, do you want to talk a bit about this, Steve? Because I know you were doing some stuff with logic apps a few months ago that
yes.
I caught you using logic apps. So
you did.
I'll let you talk about this rather than me covering this one.
So I think logic apps is very much where you're saying, I've done Power Automate, but now I'm being asked to pay for my premium licensing and additional licensing, and this is complicated, or I want to use managed service accounts and things like that. That's where you then move across into logic apps. All, for the most part, all the same connectors exist in Power Automate and logic apps. Where it becomes valuable and really powerful is it's the UX-based low-code, no-code scenario to be able to go and integrate and build your automation platforms without a huge amount of effort, other than sitting there and learning I won't call them quirks. It's the design of how the tooling works. So it's the same as if you were to pick up any automation tooling. It works in certain scenarios in certain ways, and logic apps has its own style as well, and it's just a matter of taking the time to understand it. From the provisioning point of view, it's great. Spinning up with Power Automate, you can do some pretty cool stuff.
And I'll just interrupt for a second. So with the logic apps you were creating, how many of them did you have to create from scratch versus were there any GitHub repos that you were able to leverage for your projects?
All the ones I was doing was from scratch. I know that's not the answer you wanted to hear, Mark.
Oh, no, I was just curious.
A lot of what I was doing was, for lack of a better term, it was bespoke proof of concept technology and scenarios. So the scenario that Mark's alluding to for the conversational point is we have the ability to pipe out all your Intune diagnostic data into Event Hub. And the way you'd put it into Event Hub rather than Log Analytics is you don't pay for the messages going into Event Hub, and because you're not paying to store them. They only have a short life of 24 hours. You then use Logic App to go and grab the events that you actually want to process and track, and you dump them into your Log Analytics. So it's a way to reduce cost, but also it gives you the ability to put controls around, if I get this alert as it comes through the pipeline, go and do action. So the demo that we were talking about was where I had a group of executives going and provisioning brand new devices. I don't know the device ID. I don't know who it's associated to, but I need that device. I need to be able to target updates policies to that explicit device based on the user signed in. And this is how you can do it with the logic app scenarios. And that concept, that process of I'm going to do action based on multiple different lists or data sets and then process is where you start seeing into these alert responses and Sentinel automation, where you can sit there and go, if I get a file access problem on this computer for this amount of times, I'm going to automatically go and close all the alerts rather than having to manually go and close 1,000 alerts because my security tooling's had a false positive. And it's that level of automation that you can build in. There are a raft of connectors that are native there. A lot of what I was doing though was graph calls. We actually went through that on Intune training. Yes, shameless plug, where you can go and do that graph call and use managed identities to do the calls and everything associated. So it's actually pretty awesome in that you can do it low code, no code without having to have a huge amount of effort. But the automation rules and controls work for any platform that you're wanting to use. It's super, super flexible, and it gives you the ability. So if we look at here for like Defender for Cloud Automation, great. I could then go and pull information that I'm pumping into Sentinel and process that and do my treatment before it lands in Sentinel. Or I can go and process an alert from Defender and do some treatment over the top of it, add in additional data points from other systems. So for example, I have an alert raised on device A that user XYZ is doing blah. I'm going to go across to Intune, get all of the information about the device, and I'm going to attach it to the record. And then I'm also going to go to Entra and grab all of the current sign-ins for that user to see if there's anything interesting associated with that. And we can do that with Logic Apps as it's coming through, so that your security admin can just go straight away and go, oh, I can see all of that information as a use case. Obviously, other tools have the ability to consolidate it together. It's just a different tool for your tool belt, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess just to sort of highlight one of the things that Steve was talking about there in terms of getting the logs out of Intune or over here. Let's say if I jump into Defender and is it in here? Yeah, streaming API. So yeah, so one of the things to sort of note in here, and this is something that will look a little bit obvious once we get into the add option, for any of you who had been basically doing anything with logs over in Azure, you'll notice here that through the Defender portal, I can go through and start pushing things through to to Azure Storage or to Event Hub, for example. So you can see in here that we have to have an appropriate subscription in here, and in this example, you can see, Steve mentioned using Event Hub instead of using Azure Storage. Now, the reason why pushing it through to Log Analytics isn't in here is because we'd have to go through. So these two are actually doing it to Log Analytics, but in this case, you can see it's actually pushing it through to so basically Sentinel AU. So basically that's pushing it through. So I configured that from the Sentinel side. So you'll notice that I can't choose Log Analytics from this UI, but from the Sentinel side, I could choose to bring it in. But what Steve was doing was just going straight out to Event Hub. And so that's on the Defender XDR side. And Steve was mentioning his scenario around doing it with the basically the logs or the diagnostic settings out of Intune. So again, the same story here, where if I jump into add diagnostic settings, in this case, this is pretty much the, at initial glance anyway, this just looks like the standard diagnostic setting from the Azure portal. Now,
it's the same information that you get into Log Analytics from basically any platform. So you can go to Entra and you can pull the same information across into Event Hub to steal Mark's thunder.
Yeah, and probably just the other thing that's worth calling out here is that I think devices and the Windows 365 audit logs, like they're not brand new additions to the logs, but initially it was just audit logs. I think it was just audit logs, operational logs, and device compliance logs that were coming through. Now you've got devices and audit logs in there as well.
Yeah,
now,
the Win365 audit logs were added in November.
Okay, so not.
Do you know how I know this?
Because you found out last week?
Because I found out on stage when I was presenting at MMS Miami.
Did someone make you aware of it, or was it something you discovered as you were poking around?
Oh no, I discovered it as I was doing the
demo. Okay. Yeah. So again, here you can see log analytics, storage account, event hub, etc. So even here, you can quickly start seeing that there are ways that you can start leveraging this, even if you're just working with Intune, even without without having Defender in here as part of that. Okay. So the other things then. I think this is the final piece that I wanted to talk about. Let me just make sure, is this the final? Actually, yeah, we'll keep this as the final slide for today. So I just sort of showed you, just as the lead in with that, just by showing you the pieces in the portal where we can shoot Intune diagnostics as well as Defender XDR. So this way we could get it into log analytics or into Azure Monitor. Now the other thing as well, what was I going to? There's something else that I was going to mention with this. Oh, yes. So the other thing here that works under the covers and leverages these, even though you don't need to worry about doing too much in terms of configuration, is with the, what's it called these days? Like desktop. It used to be the desktop analytics or the upgrade analytics solution over in Azure Monitor.
Endpoint analytics.
Sorry, endpoint. Okay, so endpoint analytics. We can go through and pull that data in as well. Now, just a quick update on the endpoint analytics piece. For a while, that was something that wasn't that useful for me because most of the VMs and physical machines I'm running, I tend to put different or basically insider builds on it. And one of the issues that analytics solution had was that it basically ignored any data that was coming in from insider builds. That is not the case anymore. So on Friday, I actually have stuff I can show here in reports as opposed to no data, come back later. And even just quickly here, I can show it to you, even though this isn't what you're going to see. Let me just pull Azure up quickly in here. And what am I going to show? Okay, resource groups, ECC, and I'll just jump into ECC. Okay, so just here you can see that this is, connected, basically the management UI for the connected cache. Now, in this case, you can see that this build doesn't actually retrieve data to give it any stats. But even in here, this is just, if there was data coming in here, it's basically, you take a look at this and you say, this looks like Azure Monitor. And yes, it is basically, again, Azure Monitor is something that sits here under the covers for a lot of different Azure pieces. So again, basically, like with Azure Monitor, it's one of those things where you can just get lost in Azure Monitor, taking a look at what its capabilities are, because it's kind of just like a big umbrella over the top of a bunch of other capabilities. And even if we just take a look at insights, like this is a list that just keeps on growing. There we go. Windows Update for Business is in here.
Mm-hmm. Everybody should look at enabling this because it's really powerful.
Now I did some works. I basically got rid of all of the workspaces I don't need in the, oops. I need to go and figure out why that's not working.
Because it's probably still provisioning.
No, I've already got it up and running, or it should be.
There you go.
Okay, no, I'll come back to that later. But yeah, so this is something that, I've gone through various generations of this, and this new, and the way that it currently is, it actually works for me. Whereas previously it had limited value because of the lack of support for insider builds, whereas now it's actually doing a really good job. Ignore what you're seeing here. Yeah, I wasn't getting ready to show this one, but otherwise, basically understanding a little bit about log analytics. As to whether or not you really need to learn KQL, I guess now with ChatGPT and with Copilot, investing in KQL probably isn't as valuable as it was, unless you just really need to live inside of it and actually really know what you're doing with it. But otherwise, these are basically, like people who need to get data or logs into Azure. Basically KQL, log analytics, Azure Monitor, and some of the related pieces are just going to be, they're just things that you have to get used to navigating. Okay, so with that, any final, actually, I'll stop the recording so we can switch over. Sorry, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I just had one more topic, which is now getting very interesting in my life, and wanted to discuss. So there's this whole section. I would probably categorize whatever we saw right now as Azure fundamentals, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to highlight the fact that with the moving technology and the parts and bits that the entire world is moving into copilots, I just wanted to lay emphasis of certain more services in Azure, something called as Azure AI services and Azure machine learning services. They are becoming more and more critical as we speak. They used to be called as Azure Cognitive Services, but now everything's got renamed into Azure AI services. All the natural language, speech, and all of that is now part of Azure AI services. Once you have built the foundational parts in Azure, definitely putting some time to learn and put some time into development of those kind of services is getting more crucial, because I think the pace at which things are moving, definitely those would be the only talking points in the upcoming years.
Yeah, I think anyone who's completely ignoring the AI conversation is probably causing mid to long-term problems for themselves. Okay, so what I'll do now, I'll stop the recording just in case anyone wants to just sort of chat about things that they'd rather not have recorded. So just give me a second and I'll stop that.